Grass Valley is committed to helping our customers build integrated systems that simply work. With solutions from our comprehensive portfolio and from our partners in the GVTech Alliance. The GVTA allows us to deliver guaranteed interoperable solutions that will improve your workflow, efficiency, and performance, all with smoother deployments, powerful solutions, and peace of mind with the GVTech Alliance.
Hi and welcome. As you all know, we have been talking a lot about cloud, especially at GV. But of course, one key element for any workflow is to capture stunning images to feed the monster. As we call it, the eyes of the workflow. The good news is that we have some great cameras to offer like the ones beside me. UHD, HDR, IP, we do it all. But we would not be able to get these magnificent images to you without useful workflows and our key partners in the industry. So today I want to take the opportunity to discuss a topic that is getting more and more important for acquisition and a key element of our camera solutions, which is robotics. There's a growing range of applications for robotics like sports, entertainment, productions with audiences, news, remote, and of course a growing suite of productions which make use of virtual and augmented reality. So let me introduce you to three great long-time partners and members of the Grass Valley Technology Alliance with whom we're going to talk about these subjects and what to consider when talking robotics. We have Paddy Taylor from Mark Roberts Motion Control. We have James Edershaw from Shotoku. And we have Neil Gardner from Vinton. Gentlemen, welcome. Can I please ask each of you one by one to introduce yourself and describe in a nutshell what your respective companies do? So Paddy, can I start with you?
Hi, sure. I'm Paddy Taylor. I'm head of broadcast for MRMC, Mark Roberts Motion Control. We're part of the Nikon Group. We're a British company, do our sort of R&D and manufacturing here in the UK, but proudly part of Nikon as a parent company.
Great. Thank you for being here. James.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Yeah, I'm James Edershaw. I'm Managing Director of Shotoku in the UK. Shotoku UK is part of the Shotoku Corporation in Japan, which is a privately held business working in engineering and broadcast, of course. Been going over 70 years. And we're in the UK here doing the robotics. So UK is the robotics Centre of Excellence for Shotoku worldwide. We design, develop and support all of our robotics around the world from here in the UK. And I'm also very pleased to be here.
Great. And last but not least, Neil.
Hi, Ronnie. Thanks for the introduction. Vinton is part of the Vitec Group. We offer a wide range of products into the broadcast studio, outside broadcast, cine, independent content creation, and professional photography markets. Covers lighting, teleprompters, manual camera supports, and of course robotics, which we're talking about today. Vinton has been around for some 100 years now, pioneering solutions with the BBC in the 50s, and the robotics and automation products, which I'm the product manager for, that's developed here in the UK.
Great. So there's a wealth of knowledge in this video. Thank you again for joining. So we're going to go through a number of subjects, and the first one is creative storytelling. So how do robotics enhance the creative storytelling? What have you been hearing from customers in terms of leveraging robotics to get the best possible storytelling? Can I start with you, Neil?
Yes, well, one of the main benefits of robotics is aiding repeatability in regular programming. But many of our end users, what they're looking for is they're looking for something that says a program is theirs, what we refer to as signature shots. And this is a great way of opening a program. Maybe you want to fly through an audience. Maybe you're going from one segment to another through a door. And with robotics, you can set that path, that movement up, recall it very, very easily. This type of technique, it does predate robotics, but with robotics, because it's being run by a computer, it's very easy to just call it back, repeat it, and do it the same between every show.
Cool. James, how about you?
Let's face it, a big driver for robotics is cost saving. That's part of the reason why people use it, but they certainly want to achieve a lot more with it. It's not just about cost saving. In fact, cost saving is usually sometimes a secondary thing. As Neil says, it's consistency, it's reliability, it's that 24/7 operation that people are looking for now, and just keeping that style and predictability, never having that off day.
Cool. And Paddy, from your side.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to echo what Neil and James said. I think what robotics give you is consistency in the type of shots you're able to create. We come from a world of motion control where repeatability is the key. And it's the same really and true in broadcast. What you want to be able to do is make sure that you can have those signature shots time and time again. And that's what robotics give you. They enable you to have very special moves, perhaps moves that humans can't necessarily undertake by themselves, but also they give you the same look every single time. So you're able to have those excellent intros or particular moves between sections of your show that a human operator just can't consistently give you.
Cool. So the things you hear really are from across the whole range of applications. So that's cool because we see the same. It's all over the place. And I think we get the whole broadcast industry to a higher level with it. So James, do you see robotics being used side by side with manually operated cameras as well?
Definitely. I mean, that's a big requirement. There are some applications where it's just not needed to be manual, but most of the applications in a TV studio, customers will want two things. They'll either want to work with robotics alongside a manual camera, and by that it might be a crane or just a traditional manual pedestal and head, and ShotIQ is very well placed having both products in the mix. So we manufacture manual pedestals and heads and cranes, as well as the robotics. But as well, what they want is not only to have them alongside, but have the ability for a robotics channel to be used manually. So there may be some programs where you definitely just want robotics, but there may be using that same camera channel. Another time you might want to use it manually. And that's a big part of systems like ShotIQ's, where you can just literally walk up to it, press a button, stand behind it and use it as a traditional camera. And I mean really very, very similar to a traditional camera pan and tilt head. So that's fluid damping, it's declutching of motors, so you're not feeling the motors that are in there moving. So really a truly manual feel. And then again, press a button, goes back to robotics. So you're getting a really good flexibility. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket. And that is true of a pedestal as well. So not just a pan and tilt head, but you might have a robotic pedestal, you come up to it, you start moving it around manually. Very important.
Do you think people at home will be able to tell the difference between the two ways of operating it?
Well, it depends on the program, but no. Normally, of course, the goal for any broadcaster is to let the viewer at home not see the cameras at all, not feel the camera movement. That's always it doesn't really matter if it's manual or robotic. You don't want the viewer to become consciously aware of the camera movement. Very often, they need to be subliminal, and you're really focusing on the content, and that's what most of our customers would want.
Yeah. Now, Paddy, do you think we are now at a point where robotics also can provide movements that no human operator were able to provide before?
Yeah, I mean, coming from a motion control background, what we're most known for is doing high-speed robotics for film, special effects, commercials, that type of application. And really taking that into the broadcast world just makes absolute sense. You want to always be able to recall a camera position to make sure you're able to work with a virtual set or augmented reality graphic or any other interaction in your studio. Humans can only do so much. We're analog, whereas robotics digital. So you're able to give a much greater degree of accuracy and essentially undertake shots that humans can't do. So you really have a great, whatever your vision essentially can be managed through robotics and can be repeated time and time again, which just you can't do as an individual.
Cool. So Neil, what are real valuable camera positions that are only possible with robotics?
Well, there are a number of areas where you just can't put a manual operator. This can involve dangerous locations, monitoring natural disasters, maybe a dangerous sport where you don't want a person to be close to what's going on, wildlife monitoring. You can actually have a camera go down a burrow of an animal and capture something, and weather cams, which have been used for a very, very long time. Historically, many of these have been used or achieved through hybrid manual robotic systems. But what we're beginning to see now with the use of high-powered computers is that automation is becoming highly adaptive. It can learn as it goes along. And therefore, it's very true that the robotics can do everything that a manual operator could do. And it's beginning to go beyond what manual operators could do historically.
Yeah, and I think
really.
Can I just come back on that? I think there's another area that's very interesting when you think about places where camera operators can't go, or would be preferred to not go. And we have a lot of business in parliamentary television, so governments and parliaments, debating chambers. You know, it's not dangerous to be in there, but they certainly prefer not to have camera operators standing in amongst the parliamentarians. So parliamentary TVs have been a very long-standing application for robotics, and that still remains the case.
I fully agree. And I think really the creativity of the shots have been improved a lot by using robotic systems across the whole range of applications. Fully agree. So you already touched on it, but I think also, yes, indeed, the better working environment is key as well. So the production crew, of course, could be exposed to elements where you wouldn't put a person, and that's also why you see robotics being used. So, Paddy, how do robotics provide a better working environment?
Well, a very relevant question at the moment. The first thing that robotics enable is social distancing. If you think about a traditional, studio workflow, you have 3, 4, 5 camera operators in a studio, but you suddenly need to reduce the amount of people you can have in a given space. Robotics is the obvious answer to that. Your operator can be one person in the gallery. Well, it could be anywhere. It doesn't really matter. They could be in the next room. They could be on the next continent, the next time zone, with low latency connections and IP connectivity, which certainly as Mark Roberts we have. You're able to operate the systems from anywhere. So immediately you have a solution to sort of today's ongoing problem of how you keep your programs on air. The show must go on is the old adage, and that's absolutely true of broadcast. And robotics is the absolute enabler of that.
Absolutely. And we see a big trend, of course, with remote productions. We see all the remote productions taking place with IP, etc. So, Neil, how can robotics provide a better and a higher quality remote production?
Well, there are many, many ways that it can actually improve on the remote operation. I think one of the really, really exciting ones at the moment is how you can have the production crew interact with the talent. And we've seen this in the COVID world, where you have a presenter who's having to present from home, having to work from home, and they do have a remote team trying to assist them with their presentation. But as you can actually have them interacting with some of the shots they want to take, the lighting, the general presentation of what they're doing, it really does help if it can be done by the presenter as well as by the remote crew.
Cool. So, James, what are some best practices you could share about remotely produced operations?
Yeah, I mean, as has been said, I think the idea, I think all of our systems run over IP. So fundamentally, you can have the control system anywhere with respect to the controlled cameras. As Paddy says, they can be in different cities and even countries. And we do that a lot. I think we all do that quite a lot. With remote production and remote operation, I think for this kind of operation, you're looking for low delay, so the ability to really get the feedback. And that's usually more of a limitation for the video, honestly, than the control data. I think the control data for robotics is not very intensive, so that's not normally the blocking factor. But of course, if you move a joystick, you want to see that the camera has moved quite quickly. So those delays do become a potential issue, and so keeping those down is always good. But of course, with robotics, it's not all about the joystick operation. It's a preset shot very often, and so recalling a shot, you don't need that instant feedback that you need from a joystick. You can just recall the shot, even if it's a 1 or 2 second delay to tell you that it's got there. It doesn't matter, it's there. And I think that's the main thing, really. It's delay, and as Neil says, the ability for the person be it a presenter, to adjust things as well is also interesting too. So systems like ours, we have hot panels and very small, which are essentially just joysticks, and they can be located anywhere and really operated by somebody with, well, literally no training. It's extremely simple to do that.
So the crew might be remote, but it just feels like a normal operation because of all the interaction that's going on.
Exactly.
So then a few things about the technical integration. So people, I think, are very enthusiastic about using robotics, but of course there might be some things that they need to take into account when making the transition towards a robotic solution. So Paddy, what is in your experience the main hurdle for people to go robotics?
In terms of human operators, manually moving the cameras and then the natural feel that gives you, and in particular the type of shot that a director may want. Moving that into a robotics world takes quite a significant jump. You need to really experience it, and of course it's quite an expensive, quite an intensive process where the whole workflow needs to be changed, and it's not something you can easily try and therefore realize actually it's much simpler than you expect. I think we're starting to see customers that are finding that jump a challenge using a hybrid workflow, so perhaps a combination of manual shots and robotic shots, and that enables them to have the best of both worlds. But it really is getting over that initial hurdle and seeing how it can work, and also that the jump really to moving to use a control panel. We have a pan bar system, for example, which enables you to feel the camera, to use the camera in a more traditional way. Now, that pan bar could still be located in a different room or in a different country, and you have a preview monitor on top of the camera, on top of the pan bar to replicate what the camera is seeing. And those sort of hybrid workflows using both manual and robotic operation with systems like a pan bar, enable customers that are finding that jump a bit of a challenge to sort of take small steps into the world of robotics.
I think also there's sorry, if I may just add to that, I think there's also a historical problem sometimes where very early robotic systems, perhaps more limited ones, somebody might have tried them and just really had a bad experience, with an inappropriate robotic system. And I think that's something, it's all of our job, like we're doing here, to just show people that it's not like that. That systems nowadays are very, very sophisticated, very, very capable of reproducing everything you did before.
Yeah, and something I completely agree with what James and Paddy say there. Adding another angle to this, traditionally robotics have been seen as something fixed to a particular studio, and much of that has been to do with the amount of setup configuration that's been required to put the robotics into a studio. That's all changing. We're beginning to see dynamic and virtual studios, and I don't mean virtual in VR, but I mean a studio that's being repurposed, changed from one moment to another to what it's doing, and you can now roll robotics from one studio to another, and because it's all IP connected, it can very easily and automatically be reconfigured for that new environment and that new program.
So in April we introduced the LDX100, it's full native IP, etc. Up to COVID, basically people said, well, IP a few years ago they said it will never work, then they said the bandwidth will never be there, and now we see a real adaptation towards using IP and seeing it will work and it can work. Do you see the same as well from your side, that people now look into robotics because of what they experienced with COVID and it proven to work?
Yeah, I think exactly. I think a lot of customers already knew it, to be honest, but I'm sure, and certainly are others that perhaps were a bit reluctant, but I think now definitely see that that is really the only way to overcome some of these challenges.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with that. COVID's been the catalyst, I think, for a huge surge in demand. I suspect it's the same for the other manufacturers here today. We've seen a huge uptick in people making inquiries. Back to my previous point, those psychological restraints they may have in terms of making the jump to robotics have gone away. Suddenly the hand has been forced. They needed to find a solution to the world of socially distancing production. And with customers during COVID that were borrowing robotic heads from different studios to put into productions because they had no other way of keeping. So I think now, as we're moving out of that initial phase, we're definitely seeing customers look to provide a bit of redundancy, perhaps in the first instance to their current workflows, the manual workflows, but also moving towards the idea of having robotics just generally, and realizing actually that the way you operate robotics means that you can do more with the system than you probably could have done with pure manual operation.
So, Neil, from a camera point of view, what do you think is important when it comes to robotics?
Oh, from the camera perspective, for us, we very much don't differentiate between the camera and the lens. The robotics is controlling the two of them, and it's very important that we have a very good integration between the two. So controlling the lens, controlling the camera. IP connectivity is prevalent for most products now, and having a camera that's IP is very helpful. It allows us to get that direct control from the robotics. Now, why would that be important? Because you might say you've got someone dedicated to shading the camera, but you find that with robotics, you are recalling preset shots. So you may want to have the lighting changing, the shading changing, particularly for a particular set, for a particular presentation that you want to show. So this heavy integration is incredibly important to us. With regard to the actual form factor, generally that is less important. It's a robotic system. It can take most camera and lens combinations. Maybe the very big box lenses are things that you wouldn't want to see on a robotic system historically, but even that's changing because you're beginning to see high torque motors go into the robotics, so they can control those very well.
And James, we already touched on it a bit, but is there a real distinguishing factor by when to use manual operation and when to use automation?
I mean, it very much depends on the application. I think the automation. What we mean by that, what I mean by automation is not remote control. It's actual higher level newsroom automation systems actually recalling shots and controlling the cameras. And we do see that increasingly. That news programs, in particular, they are very scripted. They are very automated. That's just the way things have gone over a number of years. And so robotics are a really central part of that. And so I'm sure all of our systems, Shotacue certainly supports a number of automation systems. We've worked a lot with Ignite, and that allows systems to be really, really tightly automated and managed from above.
And Paddy, how about camera automation?
Yeah, sure. So, I think we've talked a bit about studio automation. I think that's really important, having those preset movements. We come from a world of robotic arms, principally from the motion control world, and those robotic arms are regularly used in studios and broadcast, and they tend to be used in a sort of preset way. It's very hard to use a robotic arm with a joystick. You tend to have your preset movements, and that will be linked into your studio automation, like Ignite or whatever your studio automation system is. Camera automation takes it to the next step. So, we have our Polymotion chat software, which is a machine vision engine that uses its advanced system to track subjects. So it does auto tracking and auto framing. It works principally with our heads, but it can also work with third-party PTZs. And that really is a huge enabler. So, we have customers that traditionally had 2 or 3 cameras in a studio, and trying to operate anything more than that might be a challenge from a robotic standpoint with a single operator. With the COVID situation, it's very difficult to have multiple operators, working galleries. As we all know, galleries are generally extremely small spaces. You're sitting on top of each other. And what the camera automation system with Polymotion chat allows you to do is basically manage multiple cameras from that single operator. So you could have 5 cameras where the majority of the heavy lifting, the auto framing, the tracking of the subjects is done. But the operator is still really important. You can't have it without an operator. They're there to changes to that shot, maybe slight adjustment to the depth of field, or maybe just a minor adjustment to the framing, just to get the director exactly what he wants, or create that natural storytelling type shot. But camera automation is certainly the direction that we see things going.
So today we're all making use of these webcam-like devices for this video. Neil, what are the benefits of using a pen-tilt zoom head with a broadcast camera over the smaller packaging cameras with cameras built in?
Well, the key benefit is flexibility. With a pan tilt robotic head, you get the ability to choose the camera and lens that will suit the needs for the position that you're choosing. Large glass is still the best solution for low lighting environments, high magnification requirements, and you just don't have that selection when you go for a combined camera and robotic movement system, whatever that might be. It also gives you the ability to change and evolve with your needs. So as technology changes, we've seen this with lenses going from HD to 4K. If that happens and you've got it integrated into the complete solution, you have to change that out entirely. But in a case when you've got a separate pan and tilt head, all you have to do is change the lens and the camera, and you don't have to change the robotics as well. So integrated units, they do have their place. They do have some benefits. They're very, very good where you want a discrete unit. And the type of thing where you might use that is maybe reality shows, where you want to have lots of small cameras spread around, capturing the various things that are going on. But ultimately, they are seen as more disposable units, whereas if you're investing in a full robotic system, the idea is that you can adapt it and evolve it as your content requirement changes.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that as well. I think there is obviously a commercial driver for PTZ integrated cameras. It's very attractive price-wise, but in all of our experience, and I'm sure the others here, we're able to control those. So we'll often sell a system that has a number of ShotterQ heads with broadcast cameras and lenses, but then there'll be one or two or three smaller integrated cameras and pan and tilt systems. And the difference is just worlds apart. I mean, despite the quality that they are undoubtedly giving now on the PTZs, the lens is the big thing, the lighting levels, and not to mention the motion control. So it just isn't the same. You've got a much, much smaller, lighter weight device. It just doesn't have the sort of mass that you need, I think, to get that quality of movement.
I think one of the advantages with PTZ cameras is affordability. They speak to a particular market, and obviously often that's a mass market. Now, one of the things we see particularly is hybrid workflows, where a customer wants 2 or 3 marquee cameras, be it large sensor or broadcast type cameras, because they want a particular look to their show. But for additional cameras, maybe for incidental cameras, people walking in and out of shots, that type of application, or reality TV, then PTZ cameras make a lot of sense. I think it is becoming more common to see PTZ cameras in the higher end elements of broadcast, but I think they're supplementary to the main camera chains.
You absolutely preempted the next point I was going to move into, Paddy. As you say, with a large robotic pan and tilt head, then it does give you that flexibility for having the big telemeters. It's just the complete package, the complete solution offers that more flexibility and a broader range of other components that you can mix it with.
So every position, every workflow has its own things where it directs it into a certain direction. So far, we've been covering a lot of things like the creativity, that it isn't that difficult to get started with robotics, the connectivity, and also the fact that COVID might have sped up the whole transition towards more robotic use. So the question, of course, that comes next is, what is next? What are the trends you see? James?
It's much more of the same. So it's just about efficiency, doing more with less, basically, getting more out of the technology you have, getting more out of the staff that you have, the numbers of staff, and just being able to make better, more engaging programs. And that's, we all watch the news, and news has become unrecognizable already from 10 years or more ago, where it was very much a fixed thing, a gentleman standing, usually was a man, standing or sitting, talking directly to the camera. It's just not like that now. Viewers do not want, however important the news is, they still want it to look engaging, look nice, teach them things, virtual reality, augmented reality, all of this, and part of that is camera movement. So we see a huge trend of just a lot more camera movement going on, and that's not just panning and tilting, it is X and Y, it's robotic pedestals moving around the floor, it's tracks on the floor, it's even tracks in the ceiling. So we now have tracks in the ceiling with 2.5 meter descending cameras coming down from the ceiling. Just amazing kinds of camera movements. And these are in news studios. And I just see that as being very much the trend, is just doing more with what they've got.
How about you, Neil?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fully agree with everything that James says. And I think one of the key words there is natural. I mean, I actually think we're moving into a very, very exciting period, because there's a lot of software development going on that will aid content creation with robotics. And I'm thinking of things like adaptive and machine learning. I see this as moving robotic and automation to the next level. But it is all about achieving that natural look. And you have to remember that manual operators, they're seeing everything that's going on around them when they decide how to move a camera. They get live hints from body language, direction, the talent's looking, that type of thing. But we're now getting to the point where software can begin to do that, and it can adapt. It also, you have to accept mistakes will be made. And that doesn't matter whether it's a manual operator or whether it's a remote operator with a robotic camera. But but an automated system can learn. It can adapt. It can evolve over time to learn from its own mistakes. So over the next couple of years, we're going to see a much greater reliance on motion tracking, intervention assistance. So where the video feed is being used to make decisions for the next robotic move automatically, image stabilization, all of these things where there's a direct live feedback from the camera into the robotics, they allow you to start making decisions and doing things without actually having a manual operator on the back of the robotics.
Looking very much forward to it. So, Paddy, how about you? Do you see the same trends?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all experiencing the same pandemic at the moment, and that's really changed the way customers that traditionally weren't interested in robotics are having to see the world, and that's led to a huge increase in customers looking at remote productions. I think one of the other trends that we've seen, consistently in the last 6 to 9 months is a move to automation as well. I think we're quite unique in that position that we've got Polymotion Chat as sort of an established multi-camera tracking solution that can track multiple individuals across multiple cameras. And I think the other thing that we're seeing as well, that's part of the same piece as well as sort of remote production, is live LED workflows, where customers are moving from using green screens to live LED environment where the talent can actually see the environment that they're being introduced in and interact with that as part of the sort of broadcast. And robotics is great for that, because actually getting the reality of those worlds right and appearing correctly on camera is a really big challenge. And you need to have that accuracy that only robotics can give you. Manual tracking is fine. It's certainly possible, but it makes it really difficult when you're switching from multiple cameras to do that. Whereas if you know in advance what your camera preset is going to be in your position, when you've got absolute encoders like we do, then you can send that data to the render engine to render that environment ahead of the move actually being completed. And that's definitely a trend that we've seen over the last probably 6, 9, 12 months.
So, Paddy, you're seeing things outside broadcast as well using the robotics. So, James, do you see the same trend?
Yeah, certainly. As I say, traditional TV studio broadcast, but we do a lot of parliamentary, conference centre, corporates. So some very large international bodies and companies using really broadcast quality technology. I mean, full broadcast quality, just for what we might say are just internal communications. But it's a big market for us. So yeah, there's a lot of other uses of remotely controlled cameras, certainly.
How about you, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely echo what James says there. We see demands in the legislative market, but more interestingly, with COVID, we've actually seen an interest from the cine market. Coming out of LA, requests to move to robotics for creating the shows that they typically do. Now, traditionally, they've been very, very manual because they've wanted focus pullers and that type of activity going on. But with COVID, they had to take more people off the production floor, and therefore they're looking at how they could introduce robotics to take on board some of that production.
Nice. So one of the most cool things I think that are taking place is the move towards more augmented and virtual reality sets with robotics. So what are your thoughts on that, Neil?
Well, ultimately, it's all about creating more engaging and complex immersive experience for the viewer. And this is where robotics combines very well with AR and VR. The precision of the robotics aids that final illusion, making it as realistic as possible. Automation also allows more camera angles with fewer people. And this is becoming one of the real challenges in production of advanced VR and AR. You want to have not 4 or 5 different angles, you want to have 30 or 40 angles. And it's just not possible to have manual operators for all of those positions. And we're also looking at where customers or end users want to have slaving. So what they want to do is they want to combine a manual operator who is maybe driving the main view of a particular presentation, but you want the robotic cameras to be following their moves, but doing that in a natural, intelligent way. So it's, again, very, very exciting how all of this can be applied to increase the number of views, the number of camera points, and the general immersive nature of a VR and AR experience.
Fragile magic. Paddy, how about you?
I mean, they're almost immeasurable, but in some respects, the challenge is how you determine the value. At a very simplistic level, the talent is supposed to be in a New York skyline, whereas that's being introduced via chroma key. They don't see themselves in that environment. They don't relax into their surroundings, and that's the advantage of seeing where the talent is going to be. And you've got immediate flexibility. So, even as part of a show, if you're supposed to be changing the environment that your talent is working in, the talent sees that. And we come from a motion control background in film. Our robotic rigs have been used in countless mainstream Hollywood TV and film productions. And these workflows have been apparent for the last 2 or 3 years. And we're now seeing broadcasters moving in that same direction because they understand that the same thing that stands true for a high-end film TV production, like The Mandalorian or something like that uses a live LED and in that case, Mark Roberts' robotic arm. Those systems, those stories that are told through that interaction of the environment around them also transpose themselves into broadcast. You can see the environment you're talking about. You could be within a live LED, you could be within the stadium that you're talking about. If it's a sports broadcast, you could be directly in front of the White House as you're talking about the presidential elections. Those capabilities are almost immeasurable, but when you look at them and see them, you suddenly understand the power of those workflows.
So last but not least, James, what kind of advantages do you see with AR and VR?
Yeah, I think AR and VR are very close to our heart. We've all been doing it for a long time. I think VR is one of these things that made a huge splash back in the sort of 90s, really, and then went out of favor, came back. But today, it's very, very rare, I think, to see what we might think of as green screen, VR, complete studio. That's very, very rare. Augmented reality now is really, and tying in with LED walls as well, very, very much more tied in with presenting sometimes complex information to viewers who really want to be engaged in the information. I think it does come back to, it's not about the technology, it's about what the viewer gets out of it. And I think VR and AR really genuinely helps them understand. It's not a technical gizmo anymore that is there just to show off for the broadcaster. It is actually useful, and it's enabling us to communicate some really complicated things, lots of data, rapidly changing situations. You can really tell that story much easier with AR, and I think that's why it's so interesting.
So within Grass Valley, we have a large Grass Valley Technology Alliance initiatives where we have a wide range of different colleagues and partners in the field we work together with. So what do you think? Is it important to have such an initiative, Paddy?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that's become really apparent to me in the last 9 months is, with the absence of trade shows, it's really important that end users understand that all this technology that we're talking about doesn't operate and exist in isolation. And being part of something like the Grass Valley Technology Alliance is a really strong signpost to us and our customers that, Grass Valley and Mark Roberts, speak and play nicely. And I think that's, one of the critical things, with the live LED workflows I've just been talking about, or camera automation. These are cutting edge technologies. People are very interested in them, but they also want to know that, Mark Roberts, we don't sell broadcast cameras, we don't have studio automation, we don't have vision mixers, but we have systems that integrate and work with all of those. And by being a Grass Valley partner and part of the technology allowance, that tells a customer that, if they're prepared to look at the cutting edge technology that we both offer, those two, solutions will work happily together. So I think it's absolutely critical today.
James?
Yeah, exactly that. I think we're very much about open integration, open solutions. I don't think it helps anybody to have the kind of one-stop shop, end-to-end solution. That never is a good idea, in my opinion. And so I think, all of us here are supporters of that. But the risk of that for the broadcaster is that, well, does it all work? I can buy all these different products, but do they work? So it's really important that you have these kind of initiatives like the GVTA, where we can give some really strong reassurance to broadcasters, and customers that we've done of that background work, and the integration is not a complete unknown. It's very much known. There'll always be things you need to do for particular projects, but fundamentally this stuff works, and I think that's really good for everybody.
Fully agree. Neil?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a great forum for us to have discussions. Even as competitors, we all benefit from the growth of the market, and initiatives such as the Tech Alliance will ultimately help with providing better solutions for the customer, for the end user. As James says, the broadcast industry is also entering a very, very rapid adoption, a phase of very rapid adoption of new technology at the moment, driven by a desire to create better content faster and more efficiently. And this forum is an excellent platform for us to introduce and educate the market to what's coming next and what we're working on.
Well, thank you very much. So thank you also for being a member of the Grass Valley Technology Alliance. I hope with this video we've been able to demystify a bit around robotics, and listening to the answers you gave, I think we're looking at a very bright and interesting future with great content. So thank you very much, Paddy, James and Neil.
Thank you.
Thank you.